Welcome to On the Right Side. I'm Al Hassinger, Activities VP for Greater Oakland Republicans, otherwise known as GOGOP. Our Republican Club meets the second Tuesday of each month at Canterbury Village in Lake Orion. This is our inaugural show. We have Congressman Mike Bishop from Michigan's 8th District joining us. And we just want to say thank you for joining us, Congressman.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. This is our first show. It's going to be a monthly show that we will present different politicians, topics, and issues that are near and dear to our heart at the GOGOP Club. If we could ask you a few questions, give us a little bit of your background in politics, Congressman.
In politics, well, I was born and raised in this area. I'm from Rochester originally. I went to the University of Michigan. I got my law degree from Michigan State University. I practiced law. I was a prosecutor locally here in Orion Township. I then went on after that to go into the State House of Michigan and served for 2 terms there. Then went to the State Senate representing this community the whole time when I was for two terms. In the second term, I served as Senate Majority Leader of the Michigan Senate. And in 2010, I left state government back into the private sector from whence I came. And it was 4 years later that this opportunity to run for the United States Congress availed itself. And so that's where I've been since the last 3 years.
And you're about halfway through your term right now. Could you update us on some of the things that you're working on?
Sure. Actually, it's my second term. I was elected, then re-elected. And I had a great first term. I was able to work with my colleagues, both sides of the aisle, both chambers, to get a bill passed as a freshman to extend the Perkins Loan program for college students who are in need. That bill was signed by the president and hangs on my wall now. I'm very proud of it. It was a difficult thing to do, but I do believe it was the right thing to do. Helped a lot of people who wanted to go to college that couldn't. And since then, I've been working in the Judiciary Committee in an oversight capacity. I've had a chance to do a lot of work with the FBI, with Comey and Loretta Lynch and Eric Holder. Some very interesting stuff that needed to be done, continues to need to be done. I've left the Judiciary Committee now. The leadership has placed me on the Ways and Means Committee, which is responsible for the tax writing and a lot of other things. And I was part of the tax reform that recently went through, helped write the bill, had a chance to work with a lot of local folks here and make sure that we did it right, local families, and I'm very proud of that fact. So it's been a full plate.
It sounds like a full plate. Were there any items in particular that you fought for in the tax bill?
Well, for me, the most important thing when the bill left the House, it did not have a provision for education. I wanted to make sure that when we delivered tax relief to our families, that we made sure that we didn't leave our students behind who are overwhelmed with debt right now. So I fought to keep the deduction for student loan interest in place, and also for graduate students that have the opportunity to receive an education in exchange for pay. And in order for us to keep that in place, we really had to fight hard in the Senate to make it happen. So that really was the area of my interest. I also worked very hard on the small business provisions because, frankly, small business is the backbone of our economy and the most important part of the business community. It creates the most jobs.
That sounds exactly what it's all about, is creating jobs. We can certainly see the impact of the tax reform right now on the economy every single day. The stock market seems to be doing better. We're hearing better economic numbers. We're hearing about growth in general in the economy. Could you give us some examples specifically about how it will benefit families in Michigan, say the dollars they might get back?
Well, if you look at an average family, we, in this tax bill, reduce tax rates in every rate category, so every family will see relief. The question is the size of their family, the way they file. But for a family of 4 in my district, in the 8th district, the average tax savings will be somewhere between $1,700 and $2,000.
That's fantastic.
And it's great. It's, I think someone said that's minuscule, but really for an average family, that's a big deal.
Right.
And it's really, for me, it's the difference between getting a check and having to scratch that check out to the federal government, which I hate doing every year.
Right.
So this is a big deal, I think, for most families. And I think you'll see with the doubling of the standard deduction, which means that a couple filing jointly will not have to pay taxes on their first $24,000 in income. In many cases, couples that had tax liability before will not have any tax liability in the years to come. We also doubled the child tax credit, which is great for families. Every child now goes from $1,000 per child to $2,000 per child. Another great opportunity for families to find relief.
Mm-hmm.
I think most importantly, though, this has to do a lot with growing this economy and making sure we get people back to work. There are a lot of people who have just left the workforce because they've given up. This area is known for its skilled labor. We have lots of folks who want to work that can't work that have just left. And it's my belief, and I've talked to hundreds of businesses around this community, they're looking for employees. They're looking for skilled labor. They're reaching out to the high schools, to the even down as deep as the middle schools, to try and find a way to train folks so that they can transition right into the workforce, or they can go to a college that best suits them for a future career.
That's fantastic. I think that leads us nicely into the government shutdown now that everyone in Washington is back to work. Can you give us some input on what was the effect of that shutdown and implications going forward? Could we expect another one, perhaps?
One of my biggest pet peeves going into, one of the reasons why I wanted to go to Congress, believe it or not, was because I didn't like the way the budgeting went at the federal level. We have a $21 trillion debt, and it's no wonder, given the way in which Congress conducts itself in the budget process. There has not been a complete budget passed in decades, all the way through the Obama administration. It wasn't until this year that the House passed all 12 appropriations bills, and they now sit in the Senate. The Senate is a unique bird. I've learned this in the past 3 years. It's something that I've never seen before. I thought I'd seen it all, but they move at a very, they like to call it deliberate pace, but I like to call it slow and monotonous. And
glacial, perhaps?
Glacial. Very well said. I'll remember that one. But in any case, the 12 budget bills are over there. They're waiting for passage. I think they're responsible. They show, they target a balanced budget over the next 10 years. And at the end of the 10 years, we plan on, that the goal is to pass a balanced budget amendment so that we don't get in this jam again. Now, unfortunately, with all the politics being infused to the budget process, we can only pass CRs nowadays. Mm-hmm. It's one vote, up or down, and it's like pulling teeth. And unfortunately, a lot of other non-budget items are infused in the process. Lately, it's been immigration. Immigration is an incredibly important issue, and we need to give it time, but it should not be tied up in a budget discussion. And that's why we passed this last continuing resolution to keep the government up and running, and we intend to go back to immigration as soon as we get back. In fact, I leave on Monday of next week back to D.C. to take up in earnest this discussion about immigration.
Since we're Republicans and generally are fighting for smaller government, the next time the government shuts down, would it be an opportunity to point out things that maybe the government shouldn't do? Sometimes I've heard people say that when the government's open, I can't tell that it's open, and I didn't notice it was shut. What might we privatize so next time the government shut down, say the parks stay open or something like that?
I think you're reading my social media because that's exactly the comments that I've had. The sun still rises when the government closes. Not much changes. It depends on the administration and what they want to identify as essential services. So when the government shut down under the Obama administration, the first thing they did under that administration is shut down all the national parks, all the war memorials, things that people like to go to.
Which were generally open anyway. They had to actually physically erect barriers that were non-existent prior to.
There are a lot of veterans that were turned away during that time, and it was real. I think I can't believe that happened. But the president was sure this time not to do that. They didn't close anything. We all knew that this was just a temporary process to get this up and running. And when you ask me the question about if there's something that we can do without, there are plenty of things that we could do without. The role and scope of government started here with our founding fathers and has evolved into something far bigger than they ever anticipated. And I think the reason why we're here today is because most Americans don't really understand what the founding fathers, what they created and why they created it. And we need to go back to this policy of, at a young age, letting our younger people know what happened with our founding documents and our founding fathers. Why do we have a democracy? Because Ronald Reagan said democracy is never more than one generation away from extinction. And he said that for a reason, and I think it rings true today. We have got to remind people why we're here and what it took to get us here.
I also think we're a nation of 50 states and 50 experiments, so the more things that can be done at the state level, the better.
Agreed.
We're obviously a very blessed state by having the longest freshwater coastline, I believe, in the nation. What are we doing to protect the freshwater coastline and other natural attributes of the state of Michigan?
It's a fundamental issue here in Michigan. Republicans and Democrats meet, our delegation in Congress meets constantly. One of the primary issues that we talk about every time we meet are the Great Lakes. We have something called the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative in the United States that allows us to fund water purity, protecting the Great Lakes, sulaks, a lot of other things, invasive species. The president in his executive budget cut the line item that included the GLRI for our Great Lakes. We had to fight to get that back in, but as a delegation, Republicans and Democrats, we were able to do that. And so we know how important it is. Going back to my state government days, I helped set up the Great Lakes Compact with surrounding Great Lakes Basin states and also the country of Canada. I am an environmentalist at heart, and I think most Michiganders are because of our natural beauty and all of our Great Lakes. So that's something that we do just as a matter of our DNA here in Michigan, is to make sure we protect those Great Lakes.
And I think that's so important. And who has more at stake in it than a hunter or sportsman, people who want to enjoy our great state? They certainly don't want to do anything to ruin it. They want to only improve it and have it for generations to use years from now.
And if I might make one more point, it's important to the state, not just because of our environment. That is the primary interest. But we also, our third biggest industry is tourism. And we do not want to do anything to our environment that would cause an issue with that part of our economy. I want to say one more thing too. I'm working right now on an underwater pipeline bill that will protect the Great Lakes from spills in the Great Lakes. We have a pipeline that goes between the Lower Peninsula and the Upper Peninsula. That's about 64 years old. It's really in question as to whether or not its integrity is still there. We've got to do something to address that. We've got to make sure that future pipelines that go into our Great Lakes are such that they meet standards, and that we make sure that the people that put those in are held accountable if in fact there's something that goes wrong.
And so even though there's an older pipeline, it doesn't mean no pipeline. It would be improving upon what's there with more modern technology, something along those lines.
The scientists that we've spoken to and the studies that we've looked at say instead of laying it on the bottom of the straits, go underneath, subterranean, all the way under, like we do with the tunnel to Canada. This way you're not directly connected to the water. It's not together. And also you need cutoff valves on each side to make sure that if there is a problem that we can quickly shut that flow off. But you can't cut off the Upper Peninsula. It's actually more dangerous and more environmentally unsafe to transport it by truck across the Mackinac Bridge or however else you do it across Wisconsin.
Right. I've seen trains going by that looks like they've been repurposed to move crude oil, whereas it would be much safer to move it through a modern pipeline instead of having it go through towns or people's backyards at 60 miles an hour in a tank car.
Agreed.
We're just about done with this segment. Thank you for joining us on the Right Side. We'll be right back with Congressman Bishop.
ONTV invites you to take part in the 8th annual 5 or 5 food drive benefiting Oxford Orion Fish. On Saturday, February 10th, ONTV will broadcast live from the Orion Center from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Residents who donate 5 food items or $5 will receive a raffle ticket that earns you a chance to win one of numerous prizes donated by local businesses. Following the holidays, food pantry shelves get a little light, so your donation will benefit local families in need by stocking the shelves for the next month or two. Come to the ONTV studio on Saturday, February 10th between the hours of 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. for your chance at fantastic prizes while helping out families in need. Call 248-693-3377 or visit orionontv.org for more information.
Thank you and welcome back to On the Right Side. I'm Al Hassinger, Activities VP for Greater Oakland Republicans. We're fortunate to have on our inaugural show Congressman Mike Bishop from the 8th District here in Michigan. Welcome again, Congressman Bishop.
Great to be here.
You're a family man. You've had to relocate down to Washington for your both terms of your service down as a congressman. What's the transition been like for you and your family?
Well, I want to say right from the beginning that I've never moved to Washington, D.C.
Good.
I've always believed that to do my job, I have to live in my district, and that's always the case. When I was in state government, I can count on my hand in 12 years how many times I spent the night elsewhere.
Right.
It's important for me to be at home and be in the area that I represent with constituents that I represent, and I do believe that. I think it's true with any elected official at any level. But when it comes to Washington, D.C., it still requires me to spend some time there. And I average about 9 nights a month, give or take a few nights based on the schedule, and which is a lot still because I've got three kids, one senior in high school, one sophomore, and one that's 12 and growing quite quickly. So I want to spend as much time with them as I can, and that's been probably the most difficult transition for me, is to not be with them as much as I would like to be. I'm not so sure they want me to be with them as much as I want to be with them, but my wife and I are fortunate to be able to live in Rochester in our home community. I'm born and raised there, so I maintain contacts there. Will not change that. I just want to make you know, and the listeners know, that watchers, the viewers know, that it's important for members of elected government to be here, and I made that commitment from the get-go, and I won't change that.
I think that's great. One thing that did happen when you were in Washington was you were shot at. You were part of that terrible issue that happened during the baseball game. Can you tell us how that affected you, your family, and perhaps segue into Second Amendment rights and right to carry the reciprocity across the United States? We've had people talk to GOGOP in the past about that, and it's certainly an issue that would interest our members.
Well, I'm an elected government because of the Constitution. My primary purpose is to defend the Constitution. I believe that's the fundamental concept of government to begin with, and part of that is the Second Amendment. I did go through a horrific experience. I was at the baseball practice that morning, and we were just having a very casual morning. It was about 7 o'clock. We do this for charity, a charity game that we play in. And there was a person that walked up, and I happened to see him out of the corner of my eye. I watched the shot hit the ground. I watched a good friend of mine get shot on the second round. It was very traumatic to see. I watched another friend of mine running across the field from shortstop, dancing like he was literally being shot at as he ran by. Bullets flying over my head, hitting the chain link fence behind me. And everybody else got into the dugout. I could not get into the dugout because I was on the field still, and I was wide open. All I could do was kind of rotate my body, and so he didn't have a kill shot. That was really what was going through my mind. I got up to run, and the only reason why I got out of that area, because there was only one way out, a gate to get out. The only reason why I got up and was able to run was because as I got up to run, one of the armed detail of the whip came running in, shooting as he came. Literally, I was bent down. He firing over me. I can still see the flashes in my mind. And he laid down ground cover with a handgun, while this guy had a long rifle, was shooting, double tapping on his trigger, emptying one clip after the next. And the bravery that he showed running in there as I was running out is something that I will never forget. And I am forever in debt to him, and the rest of us are too, because I can assure you that I would not be sitting here, and none of us would be sitting here if that had not been the case, because this guy knew exactly what to do. He was coming right around to the only gate, and he was just going to take us out one by one. And this individual, who had the right to keep and bear arms, came in that gate and did what he was supposed to do, a law-abiding citizen, protecting other law-abiding citizens. And that is, to me, the ultimate example of why I will always defend. And to me, the concept of the Constitution is important. The express terms of the Constitution, especially in the Second Amendment, cannot be more clear. But to see it in action like that is something that I will never forget, and I will always raise up as an example of why I'm here today.
Washington, D.C. is a little bit of a different type of town than I think most people would be used to.
That's an understatement.
I'm being polite. But as an elected official, or just when you're in Washington, D.C., are there particular restrictions on Second Amendment carry? For instance, at the game, even though you were dressed for a softball game, would anybody have had a gun there to shoot back, or was it restricted, something along those lines?
Well, it's a baseball game.
Oh, baseball, sorry, not softball.
We're playing fastball, so yeah, I have to remind people of that fact. But at the baseball game, we actually played the game 2 nights later. 25,000 people showed up. We raised almost $3 million for charity. It was incredible. I don't think there's anybody in the field that was concerned about their safety. The police, I can't say enough about law enforcement at every level. They were there participating in the crowd. It was just a great feeling to be there and knowing that they were there for the right reason. But that said, Washington, D.C. is an anomaly in this country. It doesn't seem like any rights exist in that town, especially not the Second Amendment. This is why I've always supported the idea of reciprocity, and that gun owners who have a CPL, who are law-abiding citizens, who carry concealed according to the law in their state, should be able to cross state lines without having to stop at the border, lock things up, and read the law real quick to figure out what it is in that state. Reciprocity preserves every state law, but it allows a person who is a lawful carrier in their state to cross state lines without breaking the law. And this would be true across the country. We just passed the National Reciprocity Law, a law that was offered. I co-sponsored it by Richard Hudson, a member from North Carolina, and it passed with flying colors out of the House. It still awaits the glacial...
The Senate again.
Yes, the glacial forward progress of the Senate, and we're going to continue to push for that.
It's so important because when the congressman mentioned traveling from state to state and the Second Amendment rights that you have, they do seem to disappear when you go to some of the more liberal states. I remember hearing a story about a woman who was crossing from Pennsylvania into my old home state, New Jersey, and was stopped and eventually, I believe, was pardoned by Governor Christie for having a legal weapon in her car simply because she had crossed a state line. So more power to you for supporting the reciprocity, and please keep us posted on its progress.
We hear those examples all the time, and I would add that, not only are we defending the Second Amendment here, but we're also defending the 10th Amendment, the rights of the states to create their own laws. If New Jersey wants to have laws of their own, that's fine. But you look at the state of Illinois. It's got much more restrictive laws in Illinois than we do in Michigan, yet you're more likely to get injured by gun in Illinois than you are in Michigan.
I think it also protects the First Amendment too, because it means sometimes very little without the Second Amendment.
It's amazing how powerful that Second Amendment is.
Thank you. We were talking about families earlier. We've heard about the separation of families, but in this case, DACA families, illegal aliens who are in the United States, children who were brought here by them, and they were caught in a limbo for a long time. Now they were addressed by the Obama administration with DACA, which I believe is unconstitutional, but now there's going to be a fix put towards it. It seems to be changing daily. Can you give us a little update on where it stands?
This ball started to roll back during the Obama administration when the president executed an executive order that really set aside immigration law. If you don't have, as a sovereign country, borders on your country, you don't have a country. So we as a country have got to decide what our immigration laws are, what the policy is of this country. We have to secure our borders so that we have a sovereign country. We have to be welcoming. We're a nation of immigrants, but we're also a nation of laws. So we have to not only know what the law is here, we have to project what we know to the rest of the world. And then we have to enforce the law. We can't have our executive writing executive orders saying, that's the law, but don't enforce it.
Right.
What are the law enforcement agencies on the border thinking? I mean, their lives are in jeopardy if they can't do their job. So this idea of DACA, what do we do with those that are in our country right now that are not properly, they don't have the proper paperwork to be here? And we got to figure that out. It begins by securing our borders and having the adequate policy in place to ensure that happens. It includes the ability to draft, to build a sufficient border that will designate the countries and make sure that we're secure. But it also will create more opportunities for border security, hiring more people, technology to ensure that it's secure. And then we talk about how we deal with those that are in our country that, through no fault of their own, because they were brought in as children, are here now and undocumented. What we have to make sure is we set up a place that's merit-based so that those that are here, law-abiding citizens that meet the criteria, that go through our immigration process, have a path to be here legally in the future. I think the president set forth a great framework to do that. He did this the past couple of days, and I do believe it's something that Congress can get behind. I'm not so sure about the Senate right now because Senator Schumer has now decided to take this idea of border security off the table, which is absurd. And in my opinion, it's in an effort to try and shut the government back down again, which should never happen.
The Schumer shutdown. Mark II.
Hashtag Schumer shutdown.
Perfect. Also, where do we stand on E-Verify? It seems to me that if employers simply couldn't hire illegals, it would be very discouraging for them to come here.
E-Verify has become very accurate too. Employers can, on their cell phones, with 99% accuracy, can tell. And it needs to be more thoroughly implemented. But you got to give local law enforcement here the ability to be able to go out and enforce those laws too, and make sure that the employers are following the law. Unfortunately, a lot of our cities around the country, and even in Michigan, are identifying themselves as sanctuary cities. And essentially what they're saying is, I know what the law is, federal government, but we're not going to follow it.
Right. I think we should rename them lawless cities.
Well, that's exactly what they are.
That sounds, I think the left corrupts the language so many times that we have to argue on their terms. If we could reclaim some of that, I think we'd be doing ourselves a favor. We're almost out of time, but could you give us some projections on what you want to get done in the rest of your term, or what we can look for in the future from Washington and from your efforts, Congressman?
Well, first we talked about DACA and immigration. That's on in the first week that we'll be back. We'll also be talking about infrastructure, the need for this country to address its infrastructure issues. We all know about potholes and issues like that, but there's more to infrastructure. We've got our airports and our sewers and water mains, and we have the SULOCs locks and a lot of things that are part of this discussion about infrastructure, and it needs to be discussed immediately.
Well, all of those are very important things, and we want to thank Congressman Bishop for joining us. This is Al Hassinger speaking for the Greater Oakland Republican Club. This is On the Right Side, our inaugural show, and we hope you join us each month, and also check out GOGOP.club and our meetings in Canterbury Village. Thank you, Congressman, and thank you all for watching.
Thank you.